Hey Fusion, Jordan Minnich Kjesbo here. I want to take a couple minutes just to reflect on some stuff from the sermon this past Sunday. If you weren't able to join us, Steve talked about the book of Revelation. And I have a confession to make. For most of my life, the book of Revelation has been my least favorite book in the Bible. It has all this really weird, almost like psychedelic imagery happening. And oftentimes people play like these numbers games with it, and there's like dragons and the stars and this like lamb and lion piece, and it's just kind of weird from our modern Western perspective. But I thought Steve did a really good job with this, and it echoed a shift that I've had in this book over the past few years. A shift that I think is really important in our current state. Steve talked about the book of Revelation being written to a church that was facing significant challenges. Most scholars would agree that it's written during the time of an emperor named Domitian, who is responsible for the Domitian Games, and was kind of the second great persecution of Christianity under his reign. And for many of these people, they thought their world was literally ending. In the city of Ephesus, that was mentioned in the sermon, even to do business in the marketplace, you had to take the mark of the emperor, which, if you're thinking about the mark of the beast piece, takes on a whole new meaning. That for them, to conduct commerce, they had to take the mark of the emperor, which was a problem for people who had said that their only allegiance was to Christ. So this was a church that was facing real struggles. And to this church, John writes a letter that when I stepped back and actually started looking at it through a different lens, becomes this beautiful narrative about a God who is faithful and challenges us to say, what will you do? Because God has been faithful. This was a community, that Rome had conquered Israel and the temple had been destroyed. And Nero earlier had just brought destruction upon so many people. The stories of Rome burning while Nero fiddled were not just this metaphorical thing. And to this church, John writes this letter that says, it feels like the world's ending. I understand why it feels that way. But we've been through this before, and we survived. And God was faithful. So will you be faithful? Will you take a long-term view of everything that is happening? And will you take a wider view that sees more than just what you are struggling with? Can you lean into community in ways that can help sustain you in these struggles? Because God's faithful. And we know how this ends. We know how this ends. That in the end, as God intended, this new heaven and this new earth, this new Eden, this new Jerusalem will come about because God is faithful, and God is faithful to the promises. So as we sit in a world that is challenging, to say the least, Taryn and I had a conversation with some medical professionals in our community last night, just as we talk about how do we proceed with all of this. It feels like this might be the end. And I'm not trying to be hyperbolic there. This is heavy. This is significant. What do we do as a church? What do we do as individuals? Do we make choices that give us some immediate relief but may lead to long-term tragedy? Or do we persevere in who we know God is calling us to be and trust that God is going to work it all out? That in God's time and in God's way, there will be resolution, there will be rebirth, there will be resurrection. So although Revelation, I don't have the best history, it's a book that I'm finding significant value in when I take time to unpack the huge complexities of it. Steve mentioned this isn't just a book of apocalypse, which, I don't know if you mentioned this or not, it's like one of the only apocalyptic sources we have in our scriptures. So it's unique in that aspect. But then it has elements of prophecy. It has elements of letters, like it's a letter. And so there's all these complexities, and we take time to work through that and try and see the wisdom that is coming through in this text. I think the message is significant. So, it may feel like the sky is falling, but God's faithful. And although I haven't lived through anything like this before, and you may not have either, we know that humanity has faced struggles like we're facing right now in different ways, and we've found a way through. So be faithful. Fix your eyes on what is significant. Play the long game. And know that God is faithful. Thanks, Fusion.